Proxemics. Proxemics is the study of the use of personal space. So this has to do with how we let people into our space when we're communicating with them and how we like that to be. We're going to start off looking at proxemic zones, which are the general rule of how people like to use their space. So the first zone is 0 to 18 inches. 0 to 18 inches. And that's your intimate space. So 0 is touching all the way to like 1.5 feet, 18 inches. So right here, it's like your dance space. So who gets to be in that space? Who do we allow in that very close space to us? Who is it? It's our pets, our family, anybody you would hug or touch or sit right next to on the couch where you're, touching or right close together. These are people who are allowed to be really close to us. So those are our intimate people typically. But there are some exceptions to this rule. So as we study nonverbal, we're studying all of these rules. There's just an infinite amount of rules in nonverbal communication. And they're all culturally defined, meaning that it's different depending on what culture you are in. So the touching rules, or who's allowed in that very close space, isn't the same across different cultures. It's culturally defined. Alright, so we've said in our culture, we allow our close people, our intimate people, to be in that space. But what are the exceptions to that rule? Because for every rule we discuss, there will be exceptions to the rules. Or places where we have a different rule that doesn't apply to the standard, like the standard rule does. So one example might be a doctor. So a doctor touches you and stands right next to you and looks all at you and is in your personal space. So that's one. A dentist, of course, similarly. Who else gets to, or when else do we touch people that we wouldn't normally let in our personal space? We do this with complete strangers, as a matter of fact, when we shake hands. So a handshake is touching, and it's in our personal space because we're touching, but it's not an intimate person. So just briefly, for that particular action, we let people come into our personal space. So there are many exceptions to these rules, but across the board, if you don't know someone and they're not your intimate person, they don't get to hang out in your personal space. The next level is, your intimate space, what we were talking about. So the next level is 18 inches to 4 feet. And that's what I was thinking about, because that's your personal space. So these are people who you might have a conversation with, and it's kind of like arm's length. So about that far away. So who do we let in our personal space? That would be classmates or people that we are friends with, but not really, really close, touchy friends. Okay, good. The next level is 4 to 12 feet. So from that arm's length all the way to 12 feet, which is a pretty good distance. If you step it out, 12 feet is 4 yards. So 12 feet is a pretty good space. So who goes into that space is called personal and professional, because we allow people that we work with or people that provide services to us. If you talk to the dry cleaner or the mail carrier, you might be just past arm's length away from that person, right? 4 feet to 18 inches. 4 feet to 12 feet is social professional. So just to review, 0 to 18, touching to 1.5 feet, that's your intimate space. 18 to 4 feet, that's your personal space. So 1.5 feet to arm's length about, that's your personal space. 4 feet to 12 feet, that's social professional. And then 12 feet and beyond is public. So pretty much just anybody can be 12 feet away from you, and that's culturally acceptable in our culture. Okay, so there are exceptions to these rules, right? For example, when we stand in an elevator, we're not 12 feet away from perfect strangers. We're actually pretty close, probably. Maybe even 1.5 feet if it's a crowded elevator. Maybe even touching or close to touching if it's a really crowded elevator, right? So in order to kind of combat that weirdness, we have our own set of rules for elevators, right? So there's so many rules about how we do nonverbal communication in our culture, in any culture, and there's a lot of them just for how we use space. Proxemics, proxemics. So in an elevator, what are the rules? Think about it for a second. What do you do on an elevator? Do you sit and chat with each other? No. We don't talk to each other, strangers on the elevator. In fact, if you're having a conversation with someone and you get into the elevator, oftentimes you'll stop talking just because we don't talk in elevators. Also, where do you stand in an elevator? And where do you face? What do you look at? Are you supposed to do anything? Are you supposed to be very still? So think about these rules, okay? And there are all other kinds of proxemic rules too. Oftentimes, the rules get bent or broken when we're in crowded spaces. Okay, so what other crowded spaces might you be very close to someone who's a stranger? Can you think of any? For example, maybe a concert, right? Where you're standing right next to people that you don't know. Okay. So another thing to think about that's sort of related to proxemics are place markers. So it's not you, but it's your stuff. It's your stuff and the use of space. So when we go somewhere like a classroom, and a territory marker is what I'm talking about, actually, a territory marker. So we think to ourselves, okay, I want to sit at this desk. What do? How do you claim that desk? You put your stuff there, right? You put your backpack or your coat or whatever. And then even if you get up and leave the room, that territory marker of yours is holding that space for you, right? Good. So that's proxemics.